Good morning, Trumptopia! I am your ever humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Sounding the wake-up alarm bell. Because no matter what time I sit down to record this podcast, it is always good morning time in Trumptopia. Time to wake up, folks. Today is the 21st day of the 9th month of the first year of Trumptopia. Formerly known as 2017 and America. Welcome to the show, folks, and thank you for listening. So, what is Trumptopia? A critical look, a rambling and critical discourse on the state of society as of right now in Trumptopia today. I guess I could have, should have, would have added something about transcendental spin, mystical outlook, etc., etc. Welcome. I want to take a moment first, right off the bat, a quick moment of silence and prayer and the direct broadcasting of love and strength and courage and hope to everyone in Mexico suffering the impacts of the earthquake, directly or indirectly, and all that rippling, connected, network of people there. A special note: I have a lot of family down there, so my heart really goes out to this particular traumatic event that a group of people are suffering through, but I don't want to exclude anyone else. People in Florida are still suffering. People in Texas are still suffering. People in all the states in between are still suffering. People in Puerto Rico and Haiti and all the other little islands out there in the path of this madness of hurricanes whose names I can't pronounce correctly. All those human beings are suffering. People in Flint, Michigan are still suffering. People in homes across America, across Trumptopia, people across the world, whether you think it's flat or round, I really don't give a shit anymore. I've said my bit about that. If you don't know what my opinion is on flat earth versus round earth, by the way, this is going to be a central argument in the early years of Trumptopian development. It's going to be a massive ideological isolation game of, if you're not with them, you're with us, or if you're not with us, you're with them. And so we can either put the brakes on it and realize that you're arguing about ideology that you as an individual cannot individually verify. I know that other people claim that they can, and then they've spelled out the logic for you, but that logic ignores that you cannot repeat it and experience any of what they're talking about directly. But you can look within. Everyone has that. And we radically ignore it. But I digress. A moment of silence is what my point was, for everyone around the world that is suffering and let us set aside all those petty arguments, and just believe that prayer and direct transmission of loving energy work. And if you don't believe, then just respectfully enjoy the moment of silence, please. People ask me why I think prayer or whatever is worth commenting. And obviously money and food and water are more important. Special note, for those who are really motivated to give right now for any of the areas in danger, one of the most alarming things I've heard is that Puerto Rico is completely out of bottled water. So if you're not already on that, that's one you can focus your attention and disposable income towards your money thing. But people ask me, like, where do you get off just sending prayers? And I'm like, hey, listen, I give when I can, where I can, and I barely make, do. I'm trying to create this half-assed podcast thing to generate revenue because I want to be a job creator and a charitable giver, and I can't do that without massively huge income, right? Like, my $15 an hour only goes so far because I only get so many hours, etc., etc. And that's true for millions of us that don't suffer through these horrible places because we're lucky enough to live places where stuff like that doesn't happen quite so often. Although, hey, everybody on the west coast of northern United States and Canada, brace yourselves. Feels like a really massive earthquake is coming. And obviously that's something we've all always known and sort of put on the way back burner off to the side and up on the shelf and then maybe over in the dusty corner of the refrigerator. So we can't even look at it on the day-to-day, but I've known all my life, ever since the very first little tiny tremor I ever experienced, before there was Facebook to know that your friends, on the other side of the state had felt it and you hadn't, whatever, that kind of stuff. Long before that, the science, but I know science, blah, blah, blah. But the science that can be seen as reliable on earthquakes is that not only do they happen a lot more than we realize, a lot more than we give credit for. And the big ones, they come through on like a cycle that's just a bit bigger than we care to think about in our lifetime. Because it's just outside of the edge of probability, if we're lucky. Okay, but I digress. All souls are suffering, my friends. So when to the question, why do I believe in prayer? Why do I bother doing it if I'm not able, why aren't I sending other resources? The moment that I can organize myself through having earned greater income than I'm capable to, of achieving now, organize really massive relief efforts on my own, I will and shall and personally will oversee the guarantee that besides, the salary, the reasonable, slightly above living wage salaries for all the necessary bare bones staff, that the vast majority of the each dollar given goes directly in both in usable, meaningful relief items, because there's all kinds of horror stories, right, folks, about relief items showing up places and it's like $3,000 worth of 2x4 lumber, which is great if you're a scenic carpenter or somebody building something simple, but not so great if you're someone suffering through the third horrible fuck category. A hurricane's a hurricane, folks. Even if it's just a category 1 and fewer houses get demolished, it's all horrible and there's pain and there's suffering and there's lack of resources and there's lack of food and lack of water. So Thank you for taking that moment. Let me answer the question finally. In short, and this is all crossover, right? This really should be in my Zencast show, but I want to get right back to the main topic of the day. But in short, if I understand both physics and mystic spirituality correctly, then the hard rock material realm is all the same vibrating frequency, mental energy of God. So why, we can objectively say, I prayed for a Buick and my parents gave me a VW. Prayer doesn't work. Sure, you can pray for $1 million all you want. You never, unless you do something, you're never going to get $1 million. But we're not effectively discussing the same modality of things and how they actually work. There's people's assumptions about prayer. Generally, those assumptions are erroneous. That's true. There's the way that preachers manipulate you into prayer that either does not work at all or is secretly working in their favor and not your own, which is sort of corrupt and wrong and therefore not really working, right? But there's something valid and true about the idea that the human body, the living avatar, is a transmitter and it's a broadcast center. It's a camera. It's a receiver and a transmitter. We're all aware of the five senses. Dare I say, our education's been limited by centuries and centuries worth of bias against letting us know about other things. If there are five senses, why couldn't there be more? Plenty of people talk about this, right? The sixth sense, the seventh sense. I'm telling you that we're like omnidirectional antennas. We can simultaneously receive a signal from somewhere. We have to, because our thoughts don't always originate from the flesh matter in the skull, and that's a verifiable fact. And that's something that can be personally, internally experienced. That you know that your logic, sentence, machine, thinking, squishy gray matter brain mind thought this sentence out. And then another sentence will come through that'll be like, well, you might even experience at the ego self a wee bit of jealousy. Be honest, you've had this. Like, why didn't I think of that sooner? It kind of really translates into, why didn't I think of that? Because that came from somewhere just now. And there's a lot of rationales used by materialist only, and by that I mean they don't acknowledge or recognize the existence of other aspects to the universe. But that's a silly thing. Just in terms of visible stuff that we know about, that we figured out a way to measure over time through science, we know that visible light and that which we can see with our eyes only represents less than 1% of everything else we've learned about. The scope of knowledge is infinite. So, the body can be, just like if you never work out in the gym, you'll never look like a guy who works out at the gym, or a gal who works out, a woman who works out at the gym. If you don't do it, you won't look like that. If you don't utilize your... I'm totally going off on a huge majority of an episode rant that should have been better placed in the almost daily Zencast. I guess I was just matched mood. I was inspired by the fact that I wanted to take a moment of silence. And that many people in Trumptopia today don't believe in prayer. Prayer doesn't work if you think of it as pressure politics. Although maybe it does, because a lot of people swear by it. But like, I don't put I'm not a betting man, but if I were to bet on prayer, my money would not be on pray to Jesus or insert name of anybody you want here, saint or other religious entity from another system, whatever, and ask them for what you feel you want. Because at that point, it's not only pressure politics, it's transactional pressure politics. You see what I'm saying? And then hope that it shows up in your life somehow. I don't think that that's how that works. Not without action. Not without deserving getting something that you don't have, that you just thought of already, through deeply virtuous action. because, according to the prophet who spoke any of the given system's foundations, that's sort of the implication there. You don't just get what your ego crave. You earn what is deserved, and then you can ask for special perks that if you've really been living the path. But digressing from that rabbit hole, long way around to a short answer. Forgive me. Both deep ancient mystic teachings from all different cultures in all different ways, mind you, and I'm not going to get into the minutia of that, but I'm just going to say as a general statement, as an amateur scholar of things mystic, there's a general consensus from multiple cultures, although they've stated it in many weird, sometimes not immediately resonating ways, that the world we live in is in some form or another not as physically material and real as it appears to be. And that all things are, in common, one resonance appearing in many subfrequencies or harmonics. So I'm presenting my sort of postmodern take of how this convergence can be described, right? I'm not giving you for if you really want a great starting place with lots of reference material. Since I'm not the research guy, I mean I am the research guy, but I'm not the. I was never like the. I didn't think I was ever going to have to write an academic journal essay about this. I was just doing it for me when I did my research. So I'm aware of a bunch of stuff that I don't have like the handy reference to right away. But the 3 books I always recommend, which people have interesting arguments against, but whatever. I still think the books are worth reading, and most of the people who argue against it never read them, which is hilarious to me. And this has been true for this recommendation is held for nearly 30 years because the books are been around that long. They may be technically a little bit dated and not up to date with the most cutting edge in any of the particular fields per se, but I think that the major point, especially when taken together, they stand true to this day. Dancing Wu Li Masters by Gary Zukav, The History of God by Karen Armstrong, and The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. By no means are these the end point or the origin of what I call my research. They're just books that I find the easiest and most convenient, that when I read them or reread them really in later days after having sort of let it all go and said, okay, I think I understand what I want to believe in. Fuck all the rest of you and all the rest of it, and I'm just going to move on with my life now. I rediscovered these 3 books because I've had them, and I just hadn't read them in 20-some years and reread them. I'm biased, but in my opinion, out of all the other books that I remember reading, they just have it all sort of at a nice intro level without being pejorative or con jobs into making you buy into some system and buy some more product. Do you know what I'm saying? No offense to people with multi-tier, multi-stream industry type platforms in the spiritual market. I want to get in that market. For as long as we have economy, knock on wood, I don't know how long we're going to last with economy, but in any format. But I want to get in on some, make some money, and use it really well before it all goes kaplooey. But digressing. Prayer works, in my opinion, because the universe is indeed a living hologram being simultaneously projected and received or consumed or listened to and perceived is the most correct word by that divine thing which we very diminutively sort of minimize down to a patriarchal God. And that all things, no matter how solid they may seem, are actually frequency, to put it in shorthand. And that our thoughts are frequencies that either emanate from our antenna or that our antenna receives from our higher self, which is an intermediary harmonic chord meta being or meta structure of our being as a sort of bridge connection along the network of the species towards source. That's all really complicated. And I keep giggling at myself because this is Good Morning Trumptopia, and I'm rambling at you guys about stuff that really should be in Zencast. But so if you have genuine, earnest intent, let's set aside the problematic issue of not being able to send material resource. And I'm not saying that my prayers are going to suddenly make a bottled water, package appear in front of anyone else. But what my prayers and my broadcasting of love through the material hologram matrix, which is our mother, is going to be a sort of ripple effect or network transmission of compassion, goodwill, love, and the positive energy that is required for those of us, because we are all one, and we are all one network, and the species is one flesh network too, in a way. Those of us positioned to take action physically, to take action monetarily, to take action logistically or politically, are empowered by the sense of compassion. No man is an island. No woman is, a beacon alone. And for those of us who are too far away and by whatever circumstance unable to leap into action, let us give those who are leaping into action the strength, conviction, compassion, love for their fellow human being to do it, and not just do it begrudgingly because it's their paycheck job or because it's what they are expected to do, but because they realize that they're well positioned. Here's a point of clarity: a lot of people who are well positioned to go and materially contribute in some form or another in all the ways that one could, that the rest of us, and I make that division not to make a division for argumentation's sake, but to say that there are many who cannot, and that is fair and valid, and that is the way the world works, materially speaking, and that thus many who are positioned may not sort of immediately realize or feel the call, sense the calling to take action because of standard, everyday, normal, living your life, things that are occupying their attention and their focus. That's just one example of how I think energy broadcasting, once we stop thinking of prayer as transactional negotiations with God, which is nonsense, which is the reason it's nonsense is the same reason all economies collapse. Ponder that for a long-ass minute. I digress. I really got to get to the main theme of today's show. So prayer works, folks. Let me wrap up with this, and I've said this before in the show in different ways, and I think it's valid to say it again, especially now in a time of great suffering where people are suffering all over the place. Let's not forget Syria. Let's not forget Nigeria. Let's not forget all the Mimbia, whatever made-up name Donald Trump blundered himself into saying at some important meeting over the weekend. Yay, we're slowly becoming Trumptopia podcast again. People are suffering all over the world. And in places where there are no apparent emergencies, there are millions suffering. When I pray, I realize that prayer is one side of a two-sided coin that has a dichotomy, a relationship, a true dichotomy, a mutually arising dichotomy in the universe. And that's that we can, with our language, we don't need to use our language, but we can, with our language, through clarity of intent, focus, and spirit, and the imbuing of spiritual energy, talk to divinity, to the cosmos, to Christos, the meta. What's the word I like to use? The meta archon. It's an archetypical meta construct. So, but Archimedicons. Archimedicon is cool, and it might be what I use in my literature, my fiction that I'm writing. Archimedicon. I gotta write that down. Archimedicon. Okay. I digress. I'm just all over the place today. Sorry, guys. I'm rusty. I've been off for several weeks for bereavement leave. As a dear close family friend passed away, as you all know, and I'm back with my absent-minded professorisms are in full swing right now. My absent-minded mind is just exploding all over the place. For example, I have a side project which has absolutely nothing to do with this podcast. I wrap I dry out plants of certain kinds and wrap them up in wires of different gauges and looks. And it's a project that I was really, really excited about, despite being physically exhausting to do. You'd think that's awesome and easy, but a lot of the wires, to achieve the looks that I want, a lot of the wires that I picked are somewhat tough. They're flexible and bendable, but they're meant to take a shape and keep it. So they're really hard to handle, and it's a lot of strain on your hands. And to be honest, I'm some of you who listen to the spectrum of projects know that I consider myself an intuitive, and I recognize my body as its own individuated component of my multifaceted being, and I try to listen to him, to my body. I realize that I shouldn't think of my body as an inert it. It is a living, semi-separated, I don't want to say separate because it's not separate. I can't tangibly separate myself from this body at this time, not without taking drastic measures, right? But it's semi-individuated. It has its own mind, as it were. Anybody who's ever had to say, God, my hands have a mind of their own, or my legs have a mind of their own when I go running or whatever, you understand. And it's true. The body self is its own self. Every framework in the meta-consciousness matrix of fractal reality that can have consciousness does, whether we recognize it or not. So prayer can work because if we acknowledge and understand that the universe is much more subtle, much more energetic, much more about transmitting energy and the use of energy, and that energy is infinite and permanent and indestructible, and ultimately sourced from a primary frequency, which is, in our language, only describable as all caps unconditional love. Okay, I don't know why you would argue against that. I get why people don't want to believe in organized religion. In Trumptopia, organized religion versus sort of generic white nationalist Jesus worship, which is all kinds of wrong, by the way, and all kinds of Jesus is just angry Jesus face everywhere about. Because, let's not forget, in Trumptopia today, all of those fascists that were busy being angry about and debating amongst each other whether or not how violent we should be in response to them, and that people are getting into violent conflicts with throughout wherever they are. Most of them, except for the ones that are interestingly atheist, most of them are self-described followers of Christ. Now, Christos itself is just face-palming, shaking my head, the Jesus out of that bullshit. And I say that with calm certainty, not because I'm some crazy preacher asking for money claiming that Jesus talks to me, but because I understand a little bit about what exists in the world when you strip away ideology. And that's much more direct and much more it's got nothing to do with any of that Nazi Christian bullshit. And Christos never would. Christos is if he was still in his grave, he would be rolling over in it multiple times I digress and I digress and I digress. What is Trumptopia? What is Trumptopia today? I've been rambling about all kinds of things about it, and about my own personal convictions about prayer working and why, from a metaphysical, transdimensional, our science is just about to break some ground and figure some shit out, by the way. Standard science. So whether you doubt science or you respect science, brace yourselves. A whole lot of change is coming, because those scientists that are the least corrupt, because corruption exists everywhere in society, those scientists that are the least corrupt and are doing the most hardcore, cutting-edge quantum mechanical physics are just scoonches away from massive, interesting discoveries, quote-unquote, and breakthroughs. Mark my words. As I almost drown in my water. What is Trumptopia today? Trumptopia is social conditioning. Donald J. Trump is not the author nor the captain of Trumptopia. Donald J. Trump is, forgive me for coughing on the air, live and not editing out. Donald J. Trump is a expression of, a symptom of, the poster child, yes, of the symptomology of the latest round of social conditioning for the mental oppression experiment that is, post-industrial revolution society, which is just an extension of pre-industrial revolution society. But there was an extra level of hijacking of cultural institutions at a deeper way, in a more aggressive way, in a more full way after the industrial, and the industrial giants became super mega wealthy and came to compete and rival the wealth of the secret elite, the quiet oppressors at the very ultra deep top. How in American politics there's all this talk about the deep state. Well, in the NWO there's the surface NWO, and then there's the deep NWO. If you prefer the term Illuminati, whatever. In terms of the elite oppressors, there are those on the forefront that are allowed, they are put there. I'm repeating myself. Digressing today. Trumptopia is we can call it America 3.0. Right? Now, here's the catch that I think is meaningful to point out. Whatever conspiracy theory led you here, and whatever conspiracy theories you are comparing and contrasting, I humbly suggest to you, you set them all down and consider this one. You do not need a conspiracy theory more sophisticated than ego as living metastructure of the universe and inherent facet of each internal individuated experience. Boom. That's where the conspiracy originates. That's why we don't know who's at the top. That's why we don't understand why we let this happen. Because we let this happen. This experiment in consumerist prison, in supposed, it started out as royalty, because royalty, we all agree in our supposedly post-Enlightenment era thinking that royalty was a load of horseshit. But if you look through the history, yes, a lot of them were horrible people, but especially the further you go back, there was in its origins an originating sense of you are chosen because you understand the nature of reality. And then what happened was increasingly they ceased to give a shit about that, vis-a-vis ego trap, and you are willing to do what's right for the greater good, which also progressively corrupted away from the actual behavior of those in royal positions of authoritarian dictatorship. which is really what they were. But my point being is that humanity expresses this struggle, era after era, societal, variant after societal variant, because the struggle is internal and inherent to each and every one of us as individuated beings. We struggle with our own self-tyranny, our own self-oppression, our own self-mental slavery, our own self-body slavery. Our body rebels against us at times if what our mind wants to do with our body is not, if those are not copacetic goals, if the body goals and the mind goals are not copacetic, it rebels. Sometimes the body tries to be the oppressor and the supreme ruler, and in those times we call it our body rebelling against us. Trumptopia, the programming, is fundamentally about being the kinds of things that Donald Trump is. Self-serving, transactional, self-oriented, sociopathic, to a certain degree. I don't know how intense, but there's a light touch of dusting of sociopathy there. And pathological in terms of his manipulation of perceived truth and perceived lies, because he is not only a liar, he is a pernicious and insistent upholder of falsehood as truth, which is worse, right? Like a liar is a statement of of an untruth, but he also holds up things that are not true as being true, which is even weird. It's like an inverse lie. I don't know. It trips me out that he does it so well. It doesn't trip me out. It's just fascinating to see. But as I've said oftentimes, what is his role? To be the mirror, to startle us into some awakening process, into some self-liberation. In Trumptopia, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of two-facery. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of greed. There's a lot of... Clearly, we can see it ramping up. Potential war profiteering. I'm not one who generally self-identifies as anti-Zionist, because there's a lot of legitimate just racial hatred being passed around in those circles of anti-Zionism. I'm anti all isms, by the way. So I'm explicit. If I'm against Zionism as a movement and as a expression of self-entitlement by a particular group of people, then I'm also against anti-Zionism because of its flaws, which is perpetually falling into hatred for all people who have Jewish cultural heritage, which is nonsense and stupid. Human beings are 99% genetically identical. Stop fucking fighting over being this or that. The social conditioning, it was alarming. What was my point about Zionism and all that? It was alarming and quite a telling sign for me to see Bibi Netanyahu just smother the love all over Donald Trump the way Donald Trump smothers the weird, bizarre, inexplicable love on Russian oligarch and oppressor and king. Democratically elected ruler, Titan. Dare I? He probably would like to be. Dare I say he would like to be called President Putin. The Panama Papers game is real, folks. Okay, the illusion, the Matrix. Let's just keep the streams fully crossed here in terms of podcast shows. With 4 minutes left, I'm going to explain, if I haven't already in previous episodes, what my meta thesis is. The Russia ruse is real. It's a real ruse because there is real corruption internationally. There's corruption in the UN. There's corruption internationally outside of the UN. There's corruption internationally on levels and tiers and through organizations that most Americans, most Trumptopians don't even want to think about. And they're advancing upon us a new societal code to try to keep us more extremely... 4 minutes and 20 seconds left. Less than now, because I was a bit late on the bell. They want to keep us divided. They want to keep us angry. They want to keep us hating each other. They want us to hate our elected rulers. Here, zooming back into the United States of America, this is a worldwide endemic because this originates at the metastructural level, at the inner level, at the inner worlds, because we are all part of the disease. I always sort of giggle and feel slightly ashamed for quote-unquote woke people who are wasting energy belittling the sheeple. Because, in fact, it's all part of the program, folks. None of us are awake. None of us are ascended masters. If we're sitting here listening to podcasts about stuff or making podcasts about stuff, I'm not claiming to be ascended master. Are you? And thus, it's my worry, and I shouldn't worry, right? Because that just perpetuates it. That just strengthens it. What I'm trying to share is that the social conditioning is clearly working. The Democrats are fractured and arguing and spinning out independents and extremists, leftists, and extreme, anarchists all the time. The growing majority of people who don't even bother to register to vote in this country are being divided and distracted and confused by the regime just as well as anyone who is engaged in politics. That's the thing. That's the thing I really want to make sure that we leave on this note. That's what Trumptopia today is. It's this newest, hyperbolically over-the-top, bells and whistles, madhouse, fucking crazy distraction. And the conspiracy, there's only one conspiracy, you guys. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's only one conspiracy. And there's only one thing that their agenda is really about. I got really upset today because I saw someone who was otherwise a pretty awesome-sounding person on Facebook. Random follower. I had to unfriend them and unfollow them because they spewed a lot of LGBTQ and gay, lesbian hate. And they said that that there is an independent gay agenda that that's out to do some horrible, evil things to people, and that it's unnatural and wrong, and all those people should be fought against. There's only one agenda, guys, and they want us arguing about all the different agendas that sound plausible. And I'm not claiming to be the one true light in knowing what the agenda is. I've just read all the different theories, and I see one common ground blind spot: enlightenment. I'll leave you on that because I'm out of time. I got 50 seconds left. Thank you for tuning in. If you're confused by this particular episode of Good Morning Trumptopia, and you want to know more, please, and you've never listened to my other stuff, check it out. It all interconnects. Be good humans. Broadcast love and energy, whether or not you have money to spend on helping other people. Broadcast love and energy. It's a choice you can make. You can make it every minute of every day. While you're bored doing nothing else. Bored at work? Broadcast love and energy. Entertain yourself with the committed, focused choice to broadcast love and energy everywhere. Peace be with you. Thanks. Bye.